With the upcoming release of Legends CA, I wanted to discuss the teams I've trained over the last 5 years, beginning with what I think is the most unconventional team that I trained in Pokémon White. This playthrough was originally meant to be a Nuzlocke, and I've attempted at least 20 Nuzlockes of this game, but I usually fail near the start, mostly against Lenora, and I've since decided to stop trying and just be satisfied with the team that I have trained. Tepig has always been my favorite Gen 5 starter. I know a lot of people dislike it for being the third firefighting starter, but it's honestly my favorite of that bunch, although it wasn't as powerful as I expected due to its lower defense and speed stat. To combat that, I would use Flame Charge, and I also opted to use the weaker Arm Thrust instead of Hammer Arm that decreases your speed. Unlike Ember, Daruk was a lot faster, so I was often able to just one-hit Pokemon with Fire Punch or Flare Blitz. Its ability Sheer Force also helped, as it increases your power by 30%, but removes the possibility of status effects. So as you can imagine, it was very strong, taking down most of Alder's team. But Maractus should also get some credit for Daruk's success, as it would set Sunny Day and help me through the early and mid game when Daruk was still in its first stage. Maractus also took advantage of Sunny Day through Solar Beam and its ability. It also had Cotton Guard and Giga Drain that could stall or slow down battles. It wasn't as strong in the late game, but I'm still very happy I used this often forgotten and underappreciated Pokemon. Corfigurus was our defensive wall, which in reflection was very important to contrast our otherwise very offensive team. The Ghost type is very good defensively, with 2 immunities and only 2 weaknesses. Its ability Mommy would also neutralize the opposing Pokemon's ability, and I would also give it a Rocky Helmet or Leftovers, so it became the perfect switching Pokemon. Unlike Maractus, it could stall battles through Protect, Disable, Haze, and Will-O-Wisp. Emolga could also help defensively by setting up a light screen and for its ability Static, but it was probably the least valuable member of the team. The start of the team was undoubtedly Chinchino, that I was inspired to use due to one of its moves, Last Resort. A move that does 140 power, but only if you have used all of your other moves first. And Chinchino had the perfect move pool to facilitate this condition, as it could first sting the enemy to sleep, then Encore, followed up by a Work Up, and depending on how risky I felt, I could use Work Up 2 to 3 times to ensure Last Resort would one hit, and its ability was also handy, especially against N. Overall, it was one of the most fun and rewarding Pokemon I've ever used. But we'll move on to my Alpha Sapphire playthrough that I was originally considering doing a Mono Water team, as I had seen others do online, but I decided to do a Mono Bug team as I thought it was more original. So I traded in a Sensata from Pokemon X that had Night Slash as an egg move, and used Mudkip in the early game. But by the first gym battle, I had already ditched Mudkip to use 2 Surskits, as I like to use the same amount of Pokemon as the gym leader, and to further emphasize its difficulty and focus on nature, I was only able to use berries as healing items. It took me 7 hours to defeat Roxanne due to all of the berries and training that was required. I later evolved one of the Surskits to a Masculine, but kept the other one as a Surskit. The two would work together, as Masculine would use Rain Dance to increase Surskit's speed through Swift Swim. Even with the Swift Swim, Surskit was still very vulnerable, and its strongest water move was Bubble Beam for most of the game until I got the TM Scald in the very late game. It also had Double Team, Sticky Web, and Platoon Pass, but overall it was not a big factor in the Pokemon League. So that wasn't the best partnership. The best duo would be between Amaldo and Ninjask, as Ninjask receives a speed boost every turn, so after a couple turns I would Platoon Pass into Spore, who could then sweep with its added speed and even tank hits with its Volt. But Spore only became a member of the team after I lost in the Pokemon League, where I realized that too many of my Pokemon shared the same weaknesses, especially to fire and ice moves. So I had to remove one of my bug flying types, and that ended up being Beautifly, as I thought it had the least unique moveset compared to Dustox and Masculine. But I still enjoyed that we were able to beat the gym challenge through only using 3 base bug Pokemon that many label as weak. The main inspiration for this playthrough though was Shed Ninja due to its ability Wonderlocke that only receives damage if hit with a super effective move. But to balance that, it only takes 1 hit to knock it out, unless you buy a Focus Sash, but that isn't available until the post game, and I stupidly got confused and bought the inferior Focus Band instead. But even more hilariously, it was my final Pokemon against Steven, and Metagross had no super effective moves, so I won. But to be fair, that was not my first attempt, and I lost many times to Steven and to Hone's Pokemon League. I did some other unusual things in this playthrough, as I used a Master Ball to catch a Golbat, because I was sick of running into them in the seafloor cavern, as I brought back my underleveled Marshtomp for the climax after not using it for the whole game. I needed it as a HM slave, but it was surprisingly effective against Archie. I'll move on to my Scarlet and Violet team that is decently unique too. I chose Spirikizo as my starter, but I do prefer Quaxly's first stage. I was also set on training Graphite after seeing it in the trailer, but that was my only other planned team member. For whatever reason, I was also very curious to see what this Spider would evolve into, and Spider's actually ended up being the highest level Pokemon I've ever trained, as it survived so many battles with its high defensive stat and its trusty rocky helmet. It could also slow opponents through Sticky Web and Silk Trap, so I don't understand why people hate Spider so much. I can understand why it's not a viable, competitive Pokemon, but what's with all of the hate? On the opposite end of the spectrum, everyone likes Pouty and Wooper, and that became another reliable team member. I also picked up a Flamingo around the same area that was likewise very strong and reliable. The only member that was a late game addition to my team was Golden Glow, that replaced Rogue Trio that I had used for most of the game. It's just a little bit too weak, but I still enjoy training and catching it at that beach over the ice mountain, which is probably my favorite location of Paldea, as it was one of the earliest areas I ventured to, and I remember being really confused thinking Rogue Trio was just another divergent form, but it ended up just being an unrevealed evolution similar to Golden Glow. It's one of the best Gen 9 Pokemon for its design, ability, diverse moveset, and defensive typing. I also trained a ground and rock team for the DLC. This team was designed to be successful competitively, headlined by Hippowdon, whose ability Sandstream doubles Lycanroc speed, so I could get off a rock slide that would often flinch opponents. I would also often Terrasilize Lycanroc into a flying type in the first town so Hippowdon could get off an earthquake. Orphan was the main inspiration behind this team though, with its ability Earth Eater. It also had Smackdown to bring down opposing flying types, and Body Press, that's power is determined by your defensive stat. Unfortunately, this team never reached my lofty expectations in competitive Pokemon, but it was still fun to use in the DLC. The main takeaway for me was not to try competitive Pokemon again with how tedious and time consuming the preparation is, and I just prefer to play Pokemon casually and not focus so much on the stats. And we'll move on to what was probably my most casual playthrough in Pokemon X, where I picked Froakie as my starter that did carry a lot with its signature move Water Pledge. I also trained Talonflame, Haloomsha, and Aegislash. I do prefer Doublade though, because I never discovered where to find King's Shield, so I would suffer a lot more from the Sand Change ability than benefit. Inkay was my favorite and most unique Pokemon. It has tricky moves like Hypnosis, Swagger, Switcheroo, Topsy-Turvy, Foul Play. I also had a Meowstic, but it was replaced by Xerneas for the League battle, which turned out to be the right decision as it was my last remaining Pokemon in the Champion Diantha battle. Unfortunately, I never made it to the Champion battle in my Pokemon Sun Nuzlocke due to all of the Pokemon dying. as I became overconfident after catching Solgaleo, thinking I could take on the rest of the league without training. And let's just say I didn't live to see another day. So I won't share a team as it was constantly changing, but my favorite Pokemon from that run was Mudsdale, that endured through so many battles with its ability Stamina. Unfortunately it fell against Luzamine, but it remains one of my favorite Pokemon. I likewise don't have a consistent team to share in Legends Arceus, as he swapped through many Pokemon to complete the tasks. My main members were Typhlosion and Tangrowth though. Finally, I thought I would mention a Pokemon X Wonderlocke that I attempted late last year. I yet again failed at the second gym, but I'm honestly relieved that I did fail, because I didn't really want to replay Pokemon X, or any Pokemon game for that matter, before Legends EA, so the Wonderlocke playthrough was rather impulsive and accidental, as I yet again learned not to rush through a game as that only results in heinous move mistakes and frustration. I did at least learn some Spanish though, as I played the game in Spanish, and it did reaffirm many of my opinions of X and Y as we get closer to CA. That while X and Y definitely took a step back from Generation 5 in many facets, including difficulty, seriousness, and character development, I also don't think X and Y was trying to follow up Generation 5 in any sense, as it decidedly championed accessibility through customization and the friendly tone of the adventure. I've just decided to assess and appreciate Generation 6 for what it is, which was essentially my conclusion in my X and Y video, that each generation bringing something different to the table, whether it be for the better or worse, or the different weaknesses or strengths of that, just causes me to appreciate each game for what it is. This run also reminded me how linear X and Y is, which I had forgotten, and how much hand holding there is. I was also surprised at how many callbacks it made to cancel, and I was yet again reminded of how much X and Y benefited from the online functionality, as it's almost depressing playing the game after the servers shut down. And that is all of my Pokemon teams that I trained in the last 5-ish years, not including all of my other failed Nuzlocke attempts. Be sure to let me know what teams you've trained throughout the years down below, and whether you play by any unique rules.